church. I want to welcome you to another midweek update with your pastor, and hope you're doing well on this Wednesday. Well, we've had a great start to the summer at First Baptist. Last week we had really incredible time with our youth as Encounter Week took place right here in Arlington, and we just had a wonderful time, very spiritually enriching and transformative for our students. Also, it was just really good for them just in general, just to be together. About 125 of our youth, just our kids, together for youth camp here in Arlington. We had a great time together. So a word of thanks to all the volunteers, to our youth ministry staff, our media team, and everybody that just made that possible. It was really incredible. This week we've had Kinder Bible, so our preschool ministry has been in full swing. We've already had our first Tremendous Tuesday with our children's ministry, and so I'm just grateful for just what's happening across the life of our church this summer. This coming Saturday, our men's ministry is sponsoring a men's breakfast where I'm going to be sharing some words with our men, and we'll just continue to make our way through the rest of the summer, and I'm really looking forward to spending that time with you. I'm excited about how God's at work in our church. I would tell you that this year, I didn't do this last year, but you know it's been my custom to take the month of July out of the pulpit, and I'll spend some time studying and planning and praying and casting vision for the year ahead of us, and so I will do that again this year. So during the month of July, I'm grateful for Dr. Wade, our pastor emeritus. He'll be preaching the first Sunday in July, on July the 4th actually, our nation's birthday. The next Sunday, Gary Stidham, who is our campus minister here on UTA's campus for our Baptist student ministry. And he's a deacon in our church. He and Teresa and their family are members at First Baptist. He'll be preaching for me that next Sunday. And then Katie Reed Hodges, our new minister of congregational life, she'll be preaching the final 2 Sundays in July. Then I'll be back in the first Sunday of August, and we'll begin a new series where we'll be focusing on a faith-filled church. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And then beginning the second Sunday of August, we'll start our summer Bible study on that Sunday night through Wednesday night, and I'll be leading us in that as well. Want to mark your calendar for the first Sunday of August. That day we're going to celebrate Tilly Bergen's 35th anniversary on our staff here at First Baptist, so we're looking forward to that as well. So with all of that said, I'm standing here today in front of the UTA bookstore, and this is actually a very historic spot for us as a church. You know that this is our 150th anniversary as a church at First Baptist. We began in February of 1871, and actually our church started about 3 miles south of here at what is known as Johnson Station. It originally was a Texas Rangers outpost, a station, if you will, a Rangers station. It eventually became a stagecoach stop, and in 1871, that's when our church began. However, in July of 1876, so 145 years ago, the railroad opened here in Arlington, 3 miles north of Johnson Station, and the first train actually made its way through the city of Arlington, or this community, if you will, in July of 1876. So our pastor at the time was a man named Josiah Leake, and Pastor Leake decided that the church needed to relocate, and the church needed to leave the area around the stagecoach stop, and he felt like that the railroad represented the future. Many of the folks had moved north to this new community, and so the church moved north 3 miles and relocated just about where we're standing today, between Oak Street and Center Street. And we built a white frame building here. And so beginning in 1876, 145 years ago, this was the home to First Baptist Arlington. It's actually, at that time, once the church moved to this location, it changed its name from Johnson Station Baptist to Arlington Baptist Church. Excuse me. We had 73 members that were actually on roll at the time, and the church only met once a month. So for some of us today, that wouldn't be quite much of a change, but actually just met on the 4th Sunday, and Josiah Leake served as the pastor, built the white frame building, and for the next 30 years, this is where our church met and worshiped. And so think about all the changes that took place in the history of the U.S. between 1876 and about 1910 or so. A lot of things changed. The nation pulled out of the terrible Civil War, came back together as the United States of America, continued to expand, and the Industrial Revolution took place, and really the nation was transformed by that incredible technological advancement. And cosmopolitan communities began to grow up, built around some of those industrial and technological advancements. Fort Worth and Dallas were two of those cities that benefited from the technology. As a matter of fact, in the year 1900, Dallas and Fort Worth actually built an interurban electric train, I guess you would say, electric rail that connected the two cities, and it ran right on Abram Street through Arlington. And in the year 1900, the first train, electric train, if you will, electric rail made its way through our community. In 1900, our community established its first national bank, and Jim Ditto was the president of that bank in 1900, a very famous name here in Arlington. 4 brothers joined our church. Once the church relocated here, they were all named Collins, the Collins brothers. Eventually, the street that ran north-south just to the east of their property took on their name, became known as Collins Road. Today we know it as Collins Street. And the Collins family were very much involved at First Baptist Arlington, or Arlington Baptist Church in those days. One of the Collins children was the very first person born in the new community with the new name Arlington. And that daughter, Mittie, she would grow up and marry a young man from the Luttrell family, another famous Baptist family who became a part of Arlington Baptist Church. And her dad, Rice Collins, actually built them a house right where our church is located today on Center Street. And so our church was very much a part of this community. It grew alongside the community of Arlington. So those 30 years of growth and development on through the Industrial Revolution, if you will, Arlington Baptist Church grew right alongside this community. And then a terrible tragedy occurred around 1909 or so. After our church had been located here for over 30 years, that white frame building burned down. And so the church no longer had a physical home. And the next few years for First Baptist Arlington were really difficult. We get to around 1911 or so, and there's a lot of disruption within the church. And eventually what would happen is the church would actually separate into 2 different churches. And one of them would become known as Central Baptist Church, and the other one would become known as the First Missionary Baptist Church. They met in 2 different locations, and for the next 4 or 5 years, there was just a lot of turmoil in the life of the Baptist community here in Arlington. Even though we were the oldest church established in this town, the first church established in this community, the years 1911 leading up to World War I were really difficult for our church. As a matter of fact, at one point in that time, our church actually disbanded for a couple of months and just ceased to exist. Finally, right before World War II, the leaders of those communities decided to come back together, communities of faith, come back together and just form one Baptist church again. And so our church actually came back together and just picked up the mantle, if you will, that was started in 1871 and continued to provide ministry to this community. They purchased property just north of us on Abram Street, and eventually were able to build the 3rd building that would house Arlington Baptist Church, later to be known as First Baptist Arlington, and that's where they would remain until the mid-40s, when tragically that building would burn as well. So when I was thinking about all of that, I wanted to just stand here today, first of all, and just acknowledge the fact that our church has been engaged in ministry for many, many years in this community, but it hasn't always been easy. It's been filled with all types of challenges. And as I said, we went through a really difficult period back in the early 1900s, the loss of this building, and then eventually the disbanding of the church, the brokenness within the church fellowship. But then ultimately, God brought healing into the life of this church. This church came back together and once again turned its eyes toward the community and began to engage in ministry once again. And so when I think about where we are today, here we are all these years later, and we're still located in this vicinity, not really very far from where we established ourselves in 1876, just right across the street. Now, of course, this is a part of UTA's campus and the bookstore, and you recognize where I'm standing here, just across from our student building, but just right adjacent to this property where we were meeting for some 30 years. Our church is still engaged in ministry. In fact, very, very busily so. The campus itself today has been alive with activity. Our Mission Arlington ministry has been going strong today. Our Kinder Bible study has been going strong today. We've had other meetings on our campus today. And then when we finish this renovation, this place will be full out, once again engaged in ministry every day here in this community. It's a testimony to me to the grace of God and the sovereignty of God. It was God's will that there be a witness like this in this community. And in spite of the challenges, the difficulties, even sometimes our own struggles with one another within our own church many years ago, in spite of all of that, the church has survived because of the grace of God and the wisdom of God and God's power and God's vision for this community. And so I'm grateful that I can stand here today and celebrate that even though our church is no longer located right here on this corner, our church is vitally linked to what takes place on this corner. We have a strong and healthy and dynamic relationship with UTA, and we are honored to be neighbors to UTA. And the fact that a portion of UTA actually now stands and rests on a place where we used to engage in ministry is not lost on me when I drive by here all the time or I walk by here. I'm reminded that God has given First Baptist Arlington an incredible story to tell. And the good news is it's a story that is still being written. So I'm grateful for our heritage, but I would tell you this, I'm even more excited about our future. So God bless you. I'm looking forward to what all God has for us this summer, and I'm grateful to continue to serve you as your pastor, and I look forward to seeing you soon.